Have you ever poured your heart into a family only to watch them turn their backs on you? I'm Serena Callahan Rena, to those who know me, and at 58, I thought I knew what love and loyalty meant. I was wrong. My story begins with a day I'd planned for months, a day that should have been filled with laughter and warmth, but instead shattered my world. It was the moment I realized my in-laws, the family I'd embraced as my own, were trying to erase me from their lives. But one bold move changed everything, and today, I'm going to tell you how I took back my power.
Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from, because this story is about to take you on an emotional journey you won't soon forget.
I live in a quiet suburb of Columbus, Ohio, in a 2-story house with a wraparound porch I've called home for 30 years. It's the kind of place where neighbors wave and the smell of fresh-cut grass lingers in the summer air. I raised my son, Felix, here, and after my husband Asher passed away 6 years ago, I thought I'd built a life strong enough to weather anything. Asher's family, the Callahans, had always been close, or so I believed. His sister Felicity and her husband Victor lived just a few miles away, and their daughter Clover was like a second child to me. I'd spent decades hosting Sunday dinners, sewing costumes for Clover's school plays, and driving Felix to baseball practice, all while keeping the family together. I was the glue, or at least I thought I was. That summer, I was buzzing with excitement for Clover's engagement party. It was a big deal. Clover was marrying a lawyer from Cincinnati, and the Callahans were thrilled. I'd offered to host the party at my house, picturing string lights twinkling on the porch, the clink of glasses, and the hum of happy voices. For weeks, I planned every detail. I spent hours in the kitchen, my hands dusted with flour, as I baked Clover's favorite lemon pound cake, the recipe her grandmother had taught me. I polished the silverware Asher and I had received as a wedding gift, each piece gleaming under the dining room chandelier. I even bought a new dress, a soft blue one that made me feel pretty for the first time in years. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric, imagining Clover's smile when she saw the backyard transformed into a celebration just for her. The morning of the party, the air was thick with July heat, and I woke early to set up. I dragged tables across the lawn, my arms aching, but my heart light. I arranged vases of sunflowers, their bright petals nodding in the breeze, and hung lanterns that glowed like fireflies as dusk fell. I wanted everything to be perfect, not just for Clover, but for all of us. This was a chance to come together to heal the quiet ache of Asher's absence. I pictured Felicity raising a glass to toast the family's future, Victor clapping Felix on the back, and Clover hugging me the way she used to when she was little. I could almost hear her voice, "Aunt Rena, you're the best." As guests arrived, the backyard filled with chatter and laughter. I moved through the crowd, refilling drinks and passing trays of appetizers, my cheeks flushed from the heat and the compliments. But something felt off. Felicity barely looked at me, her eyes darting away when I tried to catch her gaze. Victor muttered a quick thanks when I handed him a plate, then turned to talk to someone else. Even Felix, my own son, seemed distant, his smile tight as he stood beside his fiancée Beatrice. I brushed it off, telling myself they were just caught up in the excitement. I kept smiling, kept moving, kept hoping. Then it happened. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the lanterns cast a warm glow, Felicity stepped onto the porch to make a toast. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my heart swelling with pride, but her words hit me like a slap. To Clover, our pride and joy, she said, her voice clear and sharp. And to our family, who've always been there for her, Victor, me, Felix, and Beatrice. My name wasn't mentioned. Not a word about the woman who'd planned the night, who'd loved Clover like her own. I felt the air leave my lungs, the chatter around me fading to a dull roar. I looked at Felix, waiting for him to say something, anything. He didn't. He just raised his glass, his eyes fixed on the ground. that was the moment I knew. My in-laws weren't just forgetting me, they were erasing me. And my own son was letting them. The sting of Felicity's toast lingered like a bruise I couldn't ignore. I stood frozen in my backyard, the lanterns swaying above me, their warm glow now mocking the chill spreading through my chest. The chatter of guests filled the air, but it felt distant, like I was underwater, watching my life slip away. I'd spent months planning Clover's engagement party, pouring my heart into every detail, and yet my name wasn't worth a mention. Worse, my son Felix had stood there glass-raised complicit in their erasure of me. I wanted to scream to demand an explanation, but my feet felt rooted to the grass, heavy with the weight of 30 years of devotion. I forced myself to move, weaving through the crowd, with a smile plastered on my face, refilling pitchers of lemonade and clearing empty plates. My hands trembled as I stacked dishes in the kitchen, the clink of porcelain loud against the hum of the party outside. I caught my reflection in the window. My blue dress, chosen with such care, now felt like a costume, hiding the woman who was crumbling inside. I'd always been the one to hold things together, the one who smoothed over arguments, who made sure everyone felt loved. But that night, I was invisible, and the realization cut deeper than I could have imagined. Later, as the guests began to leave, I found Felicity by the porch, adjusting her scarf with a practiced elegance. I took a deep breath, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Felicity, did I do something wrong?" I asked, hoping for a misunderstanding, a chance to fix this. She turned her eyes cold like she was looking through me. "Oh, Rena, don't be dramatic," she said, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's Clover's night. We didn't want to clutter the toast with extras." Extras. The word hit like a slap, reducing decades of love to a footnote. I opened my mouth to respond, but she was already walking away, her heels clicking on the wooden steps. I turned to Felix, who was helping Beatrice gather Clover's gifts. My son, the boy I'd raised through sleepless nights and endless sacrifices, had always been my anchor. I waited until Beatrice stepped away, then touched his arm. "Felix, why didn't you say anything?" My voice cracked, betraying the hurt I'd tried to bury. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's, it made my heart ache. "Mom, it's not a big deal. You're taking it too personally." Felicity just wanted to keep it short. His words were casual, dismissive, as if my pain was an inconvenience. I searched his face for the boy who used to cling to me, calling me mama, but all I saw was a man who'd chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. That night alone in my house, the silence was deafening. The backyard was empty, the lanterns dark, the sunflowers drooping in their vases. I sat at the kitchen table, the lemon pound cake untouched, its sugary scent now cloying. I thought back to the years I'd given to the Callahans. After Asher's death, I'd been the one to keep the family close, hosting holidays, paying for Clover's dance lessons. When Victor's business struggled, even co-signing Felix's first car loan. I'd done it all out of love, believing it bound us together. But Felicity's words, Felix's indifference, and the absence of my name in that toast told a different story. They didn't just overlook me. They were rewriting our history, one where I didn't belong. The next morning, I woke with a heaviness I couldn't shake. I tried to go about my routine, brewing coffee, watering the roses along the porch, but every task felt hollow. I kept replaying the party, searching for clues I'd missed. Had Felicity always been this cold? Had Felix been pulling away for longer than I'd noticed? I thought of Clover, who hadn't even thanked me for the party, her hug brief and perfunctory. The more I thought, the more I felt like a ghost in my own life, haunting a family that no longer saw me. Then a small detail caught my attention, a crack in the facade. I was sorting through the mail, my hands moving on autopilot, when I noticed a letter from my bank. It was odd, I usually got statements digitally. I opened it expecting a routine notice, but my heart stopped as I read the words, "Confirmation of Authorized User Addition." Someone had added Victor's name to my savings account, the one I'd built over decades penny by penny for emergencies and Felix's future. I hadn't authorized anything. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone, dialing the bank. The representative's voice was calm, professional, but each word felt like a stone dropping into my gut. "The request came through your online portal, Mrs. Callahan. We assumed it was you." I hung up, my mind racing. That account held $120,000, my safety net, my independence. I'd never told Victor about it, not even Felix knew the full amount. How had this happened? I logged into my bank account, my fingers fumbling on the keyboard. The security settings showed a login from an unfamiliar device 2 weeks ago, right around the time Felicity had borrowed my laptop to check her email during a visit. My stomach churned. This wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate. The Callahans weren't just erasing me from their family. They were trying to take everything I had. I sat there, the letter crumpled in my hand, the kitchen clock ticking loudly in the silence. I thought of Asher, how he'd trusted his family, how he'd believed in their loyalty. I'd honored that trust, keeping them close, even after he was gone. But now, I saw the truth. Felicity's dismissal, Victor's greed, Felix's silence, they were all part of a plan to push me out, to strip me of my place, my voice, my security. The pain was raw, like a wound torn open, but beneath it, something else stirred. Anger. Not the fleeting kind, but a deep, steady burn that made my hands stop shaking. I walked to the living room where a photo of Asher and me hung on the wall, taken on our 25th anniversary. We were laughing, his arm around me, the Ohio River sparkling behind us. I'd always thought love was enough to hold a family together, but I was wrong. Love hadn't protected me from their betrayal. I touched the frame, my fingers tracing Asher's smile, and made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let them take everything. I'd spent 30 years building this life, and I wasn't going to fade away. As I stood there, the phone rang, Felix's name flashing on the screen. I stared at it, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to answer, to hear him apologize, to believe he hadn't meant to hurt me. But another part, the part that was waking up, knew better. I let it go to voicemail, the silence after the final ring, louder than any words he could have said. I didn't know what I'd do next, but I knew one thing: I wasn't their extra anymore. The days after the bank letter felt like walking through fog, every step heavy, every moment blurred by the weight of what I'd discovered. Victor's name on my savings account wasn't just a mistake. It was a violation, a calculated move to chip away at my security. I couldn't stop picturing Felicity's cold smile, Felix's dismissive shrug, and the way they'd all raised their glasses, excluding me from their family. Last edited by Grok, created by XAI. Family. I'd given the Callahans everything: my time, my love, my trust, and now they were stealing my future. But I wasn't ready to confront them, not yet. I needed proof, and more than that, I needed to understand how deep this betrayal ran. I kept up appearances, not wanting to tip my hand. Every morning, I brewed my coffee, tended the roses on my porch, and smiled at neighbors as if my world hadn't cracked open. But inside, I was unraveling. I'd lie awake at night, the hum of the air conditioner drowning out the silence, replaying every interaction with the Callahans. Had Felicity's borrowing of my laptop been planned? Was Felix part of this, or just too caught up in Beatrice's orbit to see what was happening? I wanted to believe my son was innocent, that the boy who'd once drawn me lopsided hearts on construction paper hadn't turned his back on me. But doubt gnawed at me, sharp and relentless. I started small, protecting what was mine. I called the bank, and froze the account, changing the passwords and adding two-factor authentication. The representative, a kind woman named Diane, walked me through the steps, her voice steady as I fought back tears. "You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Callahan," she said. "No one should access your money without your say." Her words were a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't powerless. I didn't tell her about Felicity or Victor. I was too ashamed, too raw, but her calm assurance stayed with me, a flicker of strength in the dark. Still, I couldn't let it go. I needed to know why. I started digging, checking my laptop for signs of tampering. The browser history showed nothing unusual, but I found a folder in my documents labeled Taxes 2024, one I hadn't created. Inside was a single file, a scanned document titled Power of Attorney. My heart sank as I opened it. The form, dated a month ago, granted Victor authority over my financial decisions with my signature at the bottom, or what looked like my signature. I stared at the looping letters, my name forged with chilling precision. I hadn't signed this. I'd never even seen it. The room spun, the edges of my vision blurring as I gripped the edge of the desk. This wasn't just about the savings account. They were trying to control everything, my money, my choices, my life. I wanted to storm over to Felicity's house to slam the document on her polished dining table and demand answers. But I stopped myself. Confronting them now would only give them time to cover their tracks. Instead, I kept going, driven by a mix of fear and fury. I checked my email, my phone, even the old filing cabinet in the basement where I kept Asher's papers. That's when I found it, a letter tucked inside a folder of insurance documents in Asher's handwriting. It was dated a year before he died, addressed to me. My hands shook as I unfolded it, the paper soft and worn like it had been handled many times. "Rena, my love," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I need you to know something. My family isn't what they seem. Felicity and Victor Tube channel, and I'm thrilled to share this journey with you. Have always wanted more money, more status, more control. I've seen how they talk about you, how they resent your strength. I set up a trust for you hidden from them with enough to keep you safe. It's with my old friend, Tom Harlan in Dayton. Don't let them take it. You're worth more than they'll ever understand. I love you always. Asher." I read it again, then again, tears streaming down my face. Asher had known. He'd seen their greed, their envy, and he'd protected me in a way I hadn't realized. The trust, he'd never mentioned it, not in all our years together. I sat on the cold basement floor, clutching the letter, the smell of damp concrete grounding me. Asher's words were a gift, but they also broke my heart. He'd warned me, and I'd been too trusting, too devoted to family to see it. But now I did. Felicity and Victor weren't just erasing me. They were after something bigger, something Asher had hidden from them. I needed help, someone I could trust. I thought of Tom Harlan, Asher's friend, a lawyer who'd handled our wills years ago. I hadn't seen him since the funeral, but his name in the letter felt like a sign. I called his office the next day, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. Tom remembered me right away, his voice warm but tinged with concern. "Rena, I've been wondering when you'd reach out," he said. "Asher left strict instructions about the trust. Can you come to Dayton?" I agreed, setting a meeting for the following week. Tom didn't say much over the phone, but his tone told me he knew more than I did, and that scared me as much as it gave me hope. Tom became my ally, but he wasn't the only one who saw through the Callahans. A few days later, I ran into Judy, my neighbor of 15 years, while watering my roses. She'd been at the engagement party, a quiet guest who'd left early. "Rena, you okay?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I forced a smile, but Judy wasn't fooled. "I saw how they treated you at the party," she said softly. "Felicity's toast. Felix, just standing there? It wasn't right. You deserve better. Her words hit me hard, not because they were new, but because someone else saw it. I wasn't imagining the hurt. Judy's kindness, her blunt honesty, made me feel seen for the first time in weeks. We talked for an hour, and she promised to keep an eye out to let me know if she heard anything. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. The breaking point came a week after the party during a family dinner at Felicity's house. I'd gone hoping to gauge their intentions to see if I could catch them off guard. The dining room was pristine, with crystal glasses and a centerpiece of white lilies that smelled faintly of regret. Clover chatted about her wedding plans. Beatrice nodded along, and Felix avoided my gaze. Then Victor spoke, his voice casual but pointed. "Rena, you've been so generous with the family," he said, cutting into his steak. "Maybe it's time to simplify things. You know, move to a smaller place, free up some assets. We could help you manage it." His smile was all teeth, and Felicity's quick glance at him confirmed it. This was rehearsed. I felt the air shift, like the room itself was holding its breath. Simplify things. Free up assets. They weren't just after my savings. They wanted my house, my life, everything Asher and I had built. I looked at Felix, waiting for him to speak to defend me. He didn't. He just stared at his plate, his fork still. Beatrice squeezed his hand, her smile tight, and I saw it then, the smugness, the certainty that I'd roll over, that I'd let them take it all. Something snapped inside me, not loud or dramatic, but quiet, like a lock clicking into place. I'd spent my life giving, sacrificing, believing love would hold us together. But love wasn't enough, not when they saw me as a means to an end. I excused myself, claiming a headache, and left before dessert. The drive home was a blur, the streetlights streaking like tears across my windshield. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were steady, my mind clear. I wasn't their pawn anymore. I thought of Asher's letter, Tom's promise, Judy's support. I didn't know the full scope of the trust yet, but I knew it was my lifeline, my chance to fight back. I walked inside the house quiet, except for the creak of the floorboards, and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop, pulled up Tom's email, and started typing. I didn't have a plan, not yet, but I had something better, a spark, a resolve that burned brighter than my pain. They thought they could erase me, but they were about to learn who I really was. The drive to Dayton felt like crossing a threshold, the Ohio fields blurring past my windshield, like a painting I was leaving behind. Tom Harlan's office was in a modest brick building, its windows catching the late morning sun. I clutched Asher's letter in my purse, its words burned into my mind. "Don't let them take it. You're worth more than they'll ever understand." For weeks, I'd carried the weight of Felicity's dismissal, Victor's greed, and Felix's silence. The forged power of attorney, the unauthorized access to my savings, their suggestion I simplify my life. It all pointed to one truth. The Callahans wanted me gone, stripped of everything Asher and I had built. But today, I wasn't their extra anymore. Today, I was taking back what was mine. Tom greeted me with a warm handshake, his eyes crinkling with a kindness that reminded me of Asher. We sat in his office surrounded by law books and framed photos of his kids. He didn't waste time. "Rena Asher set up a trust for you 8 years ago," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "It's worth $1.2 million stocks, bonds, and a property in Florida he bought without telling anyone." He was adamant it stay hidden from his family, especially Felicity and Victor. My breath caught. 1.2 million. A property. Asher had known their greed would come for me, and he'd built a fortress to protect me. I opened the folder, my hands trembling, and saw the deeds, the account statements, all in my name. It was real. It was mine. But Tom's next words hit harder. "There's more," he said, his voice softening. Asher suspected Victor was planning to pressure you after he was gone. He asked me to keep an eye out to step in if you needed help. I've been tracking some irregularities. Victor's business is failing, Rena. He's in debt, and Felicity's been pushing him to secure the family's future. I think they saw you as their way out. My stomach twisted. The forged document, the bank access, it wasn't just opportunism. It was a plan, and they'd been laying the groundwork for years. I left Tom's office with a copy of the trust documents and a plan. He'd already started the process to revoke the forged power of attorney and secure the savings account, but I needed to do more. I needed to show the Callahans I wasn't their pawn. The trust gave me power, but it was Asher's letter that gave me courage. I drove home the highway stretching out like a promise, and by the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't violent or loud, but it would shake them to their core. The next morning, I called a real estate attorney, a woman Tom recommended named Carla Ruiz. I told her about the house, my 2-story home with the wraparound porch, the place where I'd raised Felix, where Asher and I had danced in the kitchen. It was worth $400,000, maybe more, and Victor's words at that dinner, free up some assets, echoed in my mind. They wanted it, thought they could pressure me into giving it up. I wasn't going to let them. Instead, I instructed Carla to transfer the deed into the trust, locking it away from their reach. Then, I did something even bolder. I told her to list the house for sale, but not locally. I wanted it sold to an out-of-state buyer, someone who'd never heard of the Callahans. I wasn't moving yet, but I was sending a message my life wasn't theirs to control. The decision felt like a lightning bolt, electric and terrifying. I stood in my living room, the trust documents spread across the coffee table, and looked at the photo of Asher and me by the Ohio River. My heart ached, not just for him, but for the woman I'd been trusting, always putting others first. Selling the house was more than a financial move. It was a declaration. I was done being erased. For the first time in weeks, I felt a rush of freedom, like a weight lifting off my chest. It wasn't easy. Part of me still wanted Felix to show up to apologize, to be my son again. But I couldn't wait for him anymore. I had to save myself. The Callahans' reaction came faster than I expected. 2 days later, Felicity called, her voice sharp through the phone. "Rena, what's this about you selling the house?" she demanded. I could hear Victor in the background, his voice low and urgent. Word had spread Carla had listed the property online, and a neighbor must have tipped them off. I kept my tone calm, almost sweet. "Oh, Felicity, I'm just simplifying things like Victor suggested. Isn't that what you wanted?" There was a pause, then a huff of frustration before she hung up. I smiled, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. They were rattled, and I hadn't even played my full hand. Felix showed up that evening, his car pulling into the driveway as the sun dipped low. I watched him through the window, his shoulders tense, his face a mix of confusion and anger. When I opened the door, he didn't hug me, didn't smile. "Mom, what are you doing?" he asked, stepping inside. "Beatrice saw the listing online. You can't just sell the house." His voice was loud, almost accusing, and I saw Beatrice's influence in his words, her entitlement seeping through. I looked at him, my son, and felt a pang of grief, not for what was happening, but for what we'd lost. "Felix," I said, my voice firm, "this is my house, my life. You don't get to tell me what I can't do." "Not anymore." He stared at me, his mouth opening, then closing like he'd expected me to back down. "You're being irrational," he finally said, echoing Felicity's dismissal. "We're just trying to help you." Help. The word was a lie, and we both knew it. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice. I just pointed to the door. "Go home, Felix," I said. "We'll talk when you're ready to listen." He left, the door clicking shut behind him, and I stood in the quiet, my heart racing, but my resolve unbroken. That night, I lit a candle, its flame steady in the dark. It felt like a ritual, a way to mark the moment I stopped being their victim. The house, the trust, the life I'd built, they were mine, and I was done letting the Callahans rewrite my story. Their panic, their calls, Felix's anger, they were proof I'd hit a nerve. I didn't know how they'd react next, but I was ready. For the first time in years, I felt like Serena Callahan, not just Rena, the woman who gave too much. The candle burned low, its light dancing on the walls, and I knew this was only the beginning. The candle's flame had long since flickered out, but its glow lingered in my mind, a symbol of the line I'd drawn. Listing the house for sale wasn't just a financial maneuver. It was a declaration that I was no longer the Callahans' doormat. Felicity's frantic call, Felix's accusatory visit, they'd shown me their panic, and for the first time, I held the upper hand. But I knew they wouldn't stop. People like Felicity and Victor, who saw family as a ledger of debts and assets, didn't back down easily. I braced myself the quiet of my house, both a sanctuary and a battlefield. The next few days were a storm of their making. Felicity called again, her tone softer, almost pleading. "Rena, let's talk this out," she said, her voice dripping with a warmth I didn't trust. "We're family. You don't need to make rash decisions." I pictured her in her pristine living room, Victor pacing behind her, their plan unraveling. I kept my response short, my voice steady. "I'm handling things, Felicity. Don't worry." I hung up before she could push further, sensing her frustration through the line. It felt good, like reclaiming a piece of myself they'd tried to erase. Victor tried a different tactic. He showed up at my doorstep unannounced, a bouquet of daisies in hand, his smile as polished as ever. "Rena, we got off on the wrong foot," he said, stepping into my foyer like he owned it. "Let's sort this out. You don't want to lose the house. It's your home." His words were smooth, but his eyes betrayed him, darting to the corners of the room as if calculating its worth. I thought of the forged power of attorney, the unauthorized bank access, and Asher's warning about Victor's greed. "The house is mine to sell," I said, my voice firm. "And I don't need your help managing my life." He left the daisies wilting on my kitchen counter, a cheap gesture that couldn't mask his desperation. Felix and Beatrice were subtler, but no less persistent. They sent texts, long paragraphs about family unity and misunderstandings, each one laced with guilt. Felix's messages hurt the most, not because I believed him, but because I wanted to. "Mom, please, let's talk one read. Beatrice and I just want what's best for you." I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I remembered the boy who'd run to me after striking out at baseball, his tears hot against my shoulder. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd stood silent while his family erased me. I didn't respond. Each unanswered message was a brick in the wall I was building around my heart. The Callahans weren't my only focus. I worked closely with Carla Ruiz, the real estate attorney, to ensure the house sale was airtight. She found a buyer from Colorado, a retired couple looking for a quiet Ohio retreat. The offer came in at $425,000 more than I'd hoped, and I signed the preliminary agreement transferring the proceeds to the trust Tom Harlan was managing. Carla's efficiency was a godsend, her sharp mind cutting through the Callahans' attempts to interfere. "They're rattled," she told me over coffee at a Dayton cafe, her eyes gleaming with determination. Victor tried calling my office fishing for details. I shut him down. Her confidence bolstered mine, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. Tom was another pillar, his updates steady and precise. He'd nullified the forged power of attorney, citing the fraudulent signature, and secured the $120,000 in my savings account with new safeguards. The trust, with its $1.2 million and Florida property, was untouchable, locked behind legal barriers Victor couldn't breach. "They're out of moves," Rena Tom said during a call, his voice calm but firm. "But they might try something desperate. Stay sharp. His warning echoed Asher's letter, and I felt a surge of gratitude for my husband's foresight, his love shielding me even now. Judy, my neighbor, became more than an ally, she became a friend. One evening, she invited me over for tea, her kitchen warm with the scent of chamomile and fresh-baked cookies. I heard Victor talking to a realtor at the grocery store. She said her eyes narrowed. He was asking about stopping your sale, saying you weren't in your right mind. I told him to shove it. I laughed, the sound surprising me, and for a moment, the weight lifted. Judy's loyalty, her fierce protectiveness, made me feel seen not as the Callahan's extra, but as Rena, a woman worth fighting for. We talked late into the night, sharing stories of our lives, her tales of raising 3 boys grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. Then came a discovery that clarified their motives further. While sorting through old files for Carla, I found a credit card statement from 2 years ago, one I'd never seen with charges in Felix's name, $15,000, in purchases from luxury watches to a down payment on a car. The card was in my name, opened without my knowledge. I called the bank, my heart pounding, and confirmed it. Felix had applied for it using my social security number with Beatrice listed as an authorized user. The betrayal cut deeper than Felicity's toast, sharper than Victor's greed. My own son using me like an ATM, assuming I'd never notice. The statement, with its neat rows of numbers, was a map of their entitlement, and it fueled my resolve. I decided to share my story, not for revenge, but for clarity. I met Judy and a few neighbors at a local community center, a small group who'd heard whispers of the Callahans' behavior. I told them everything: the engagement party, the forged documents, the secret trust, the credit card. My voice shook at first, but grew stronger with each word, the truth a weight I no longer wanted to carry alone. They listened, their faces a mix of shock and anger, and when I finished, Judy hugged me, her arms solid and warm. "You're not just surviving this, Rena," she said. "You're winning." Their support was a balm, a reminder that family wasn't always blood. It was the people who showed up. The Callahans made one last move, a letter from their lawyer, claiming I was emotionally unstable and unfit to manage my assets. It was a desperate ploy, laughable if it weren't so cruel. Tom dismantled it in hours, citing my clear-headed decisions and the trust's ironclad structure. "They're grasping at straws," he said, his voice almost amused. "This won't go anywhere." The letter, with its legal jargon and veiled threats, was their final misstep, exposing their desperation to anyone who cared to look. As the house sale neared closing, I started exploring the Florida property in the trust, a beachside cottage in Destin, with white sand and turquoise waves. I hadn't seen it yet, but Tom sent photos, and I could almost smell the salt air, feel the sun on my skin. It wasn't just a house. It was a new beginning, a place where I could redefine myself. I began sketching plans, not just for the move, but for a life that was mine. Maybe I'd start a garden, join a book club, or volunteer at a local shelter. The possibilities felt like a gift from Asher, one I was finally ready to unwrap. One evening, as I sat on my porch, the roses blooming in the dusk, Judy stopped by with a bottle of wine. We toasted to new chapters, the clink of our glasses, a quiet victory. The Callahans' schemes had failed, their lies exposed, and I was still standing. I thought of Felix, the son I'd lost to Beatrice's influence, and felt a pang of grief. But it was softer now, tempered by the life I was building. I wasn't just surviving. I was reclaiming my worth, one bold move at a time. The Ohio house was no longer mine. The closing papers were signed, the keys handed to the Colorado couple who'd fallen in love with its wraparound porch. I stood in the empty living room one last time. The walls bear the echo of my footsteps, loud in the silence. I thought of the life I'd built here. Felix's first steps, Asher's laughter, the Sunday dinners that once felt like love. But those memories weren't tied to the house anymore. They lived in me, and I was ready to carry them forward. The Callahan's betrayal had tried to strip me bare, but instead, it had shown me my strength. I wasn't just Rena, the woman who gave too much. I was Serena Callahan, and I was enough. I moved to the Destin cottage a week later, the trust's funds covering the transition with ease. The Florida air was warm, salty, and alive, a stark contrast to Ohio's heavy summers. The cottage was small, but perfect white clapboard walls, a porch overlooking the Gulf, and windows that let in the morning light. I spent my first days unpacking arranging furniture and planting a small garden of hibiscus and lavender. Each task felt like a promise to myself, a way to root my new life in something real. The $425,000 from the house sale safely in the trust, and the $1.2 million Asher had left me, gave me freedom I'd never imagined. But it wasn't the money that changed me. It was the realization that I didn't need the Callahan's approval to know my worth. That realization came slowly built on the ruins of their betrayal. Felicity's cold toast, Victor's forged documents. Felix's silence. They'd hurt me, yes, but they'd also forced me to see the truth. I'd spent decades tying my value to their love-believing family was everything. But family wasn't about blood or obligation. It was about respect, and they'd shown me none. I thought of Asher's letter, his warning about their greed, and felt a quiet peace. He'd seen my strength when I hadn't, and now I was living it. I didn't need their apologies or their regret. I needed me, and for the first time, I was enough. In Destin, I built a life that reflected that truth. I joined a local book club, where women my age gathered to discuss novels and share stories over coffee. Their warmth, their laughter, reminded me of what connection could be genuine untainted by ulterior motives. I volunteered at a community center, teaching gardening classes to kids, their eager hands digging in the soil as they asked me questions about flowers and life. I found joy in those moments, in the simplicity of giving, without expecting anything back. Judy visited often her trips from Ohio, a highlight our evenings filled with wine and stories on the porch, the waves crashing in the distance. She was family now, not by blood, but by choice, and that made all the difference. I didn't cut the Callahans out completely, some ties are too deep to sever. But I set boundaries they couldn't cross. Felix reached out once, a hesitant email, apologizing for misunderstandings. I read it, my heart aching for the son I'd lost, but I didn't reply. His words were too late, too shallow, and I wasn't ready to let him back in. Felicity and Victor faded into silence, their lawyer's letter, their last failed attempt to control me. Tom Harlan kept me updated, ensuring the trust remained secure, and I trusted him to handle any lingering threats. Clover sent a wedding invitation, but I declined sending a card instead. I wished her well, but I didn't need to be there to prove my love. I'd given enough. One afternoon, as I walked along the beach, the sand cool between my toes, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, that Rena had stood in her backyard, heartbroken, believing she was invisible. She'd poured her heart into a family that didn't see her sacrificing her own dreams to keep them close. But pain had been a teacher, harsh but honest. It showed me I could stand alone, that my worth wasn't tied to their approval. I looked out at the Gulf, its waves rolling in steady, endless rhythm, and felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. I was free not just from the Callahans, but from the need to be anything other than myself. I started a project, a small one, but it meant the world. I created a scholarship fund, with part of the trust named after Asher for single mothers in Ohio pursuing education. It was my way of honoring him, of giving back without losing myself. The first recipient, a woman named Maria, wrote me a letter, her words full of gratitude and hope. I framed it, hanging it in the cottage's living room, a reminder that my choices could ripple outward, touching lives I'd never meet. It wasn't about the money. It was about purpose, about living a life that mattered. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, I sat on my porch, a glass of iced tea in hand. The hibiscus bloomed their petals vibrant against the fading light, and I felt a peace that wasn't tied to anyone else. I'd been betrayed, yes, but I'd also been reborn. My story wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation, about choosing myself when others wouldn't. I'd lost a son, a family, but I'd gained something greater, the courage to live on my terms. And that I knew was a victory they could never take away. I've learned that our stories, our struggles, are what make us human. Standing on my destined porch, watching the Gulf's waves roll in. I'm not the woman I was a year ago. Betrayal taught me to choose myself, to find strength I didn't know I had. But this isn't just my story, it's yours too. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to fight for your worth? Maybe it was family, friends, or even your own doubts trying to erase you. I want to hear about it. Share your story in the comments below. Your triumphs, your lessons, your truth. Your voice matters, and together, we can build a community that lifts each other up. No one should feel invisible, and no one should walk alone. Let's inspire each other to live boldly, to reclaim our place, no matter what we've faced. Hit that subscribe button, join me, and let's keep this conversation going. Because every story counts, and yours is waiting to be told.
Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from, because this story is about to take you on an emotional journey you won't soon forget.